Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our February team training for high school and middle school teams who are in their first year of the PBIS Academy. I'm Eric Mackey.
And I'm Christine Downs.
And we are trainers for NEPBIS. This presentation was developed with the support of the NEPBIS network. In today's session, we're going to do a brief review of the content around class-wide expectations, and we're going to move on to step 6 of our Getting Started steps, which is establishing an acknowledgement system to encourage desired school behaviors. Your tasks are going to be to draft, revise, or review your acknowledgement system. So let's take a quick review of step 5, which was the class-wide expectations and routines. We spoke about creating a routine matrix for your classrooms, breaking down your common routines such as transitions, whole group instruction, online instruction, and what each of those routines should look like based on the school-wide values. When taught and established within each classroom, these common routines help students to know what is expected of them, regardless of whose classroom they're in. Of course, there will be some routines unique to each classroom, such as those routines for an ELA class versus a science class, an arts class, a music class, and so forth. But ideally, there should be some commonalities, such as how to enter the room, how to obtain and complete their do now activity, how to request help, and how to exit the class. Of course, teachers should include any expectations for remote learning or any new safety protocols for in-person learning. If you've not had a chance to present this to your staff yet, you might want to consider using professional development time or a grade level meeting to provide your teachers with the opportunity to create their own matrices. The common themes from these matrices can help you to identify your grade level class expectations. When we consider implementation in secondary schools, especially high schools, we want to think about focusing most intensely on the 9th graders or your school's incoming class. This transition can be quite anxiety provoking. Creating a welcoming and predictable environment will help ease that stress. Consider surveying upperclassmen and 9th and 10th grade teachers to get their input on what's most important for incoming students to know. Remember to include some support around how to do school, such as using a planner or understanding those schedules. Engage your students in developing the matrix so that you have greater buy-in. Remember to always align classroom rules with broader school expectations. So have a discussion with your team. Would it be beneficial to have consistent expectations or routines across grade levels or departments? When do you want to present this to staff? Maybe at a full faculty meeting or in smaller groups, or maybe both. If you're not ready to do this activity with staff now, consider starting with a survey or a staff discussion about why it would be beneficial to have consistent classroom routines across grade levels or departments. And be sure to add creating classroom matrices to your action plan for when you are ready. One other thing we discussed last time was a clear entry point for staff buy-in. Each school community has unique traits, cultures, and needs. What is meaningful for one sometimes is not on the radar for another, so it's important to determine what is important to your school staff and where they see the most urgent need for intervention. Some schools have a clear need to reduce discipline problems. Others may feel attendance is the paramount issue. And still others may see a lack of social and emotional skills in their students as the most troubling and want to address those first. So take some time to zero in on what your staff is concerned about, and then determine how you're going to confirm that. It could be a faculty meeting or a quick survey. Maybe you've already completed a climate survey this year, and you can go back and review the results. Add this to your action plan as well.
Okay, so now the next getting started step we're going to talk about is step 6, developing a continuum of acknowledgements to strengthen the appropriate behaviors we want to see. And I want to bring your attention to the reading for this month. It's the high school acknowledgement system. It's a practice brief that really focuses on effective ways to build acknowledgement systems that work in high schools specifically. You can find that on PBIS.org, and I believe it's also in the any PBIS syllabus. Definitely check that out and share it with your team. You might want to share it across your school. All right, so let's start by having a discussion, or you guys can start by having a discussion, pause the video, and talk about how often your students are currently acknowledged in your school for appropriate social or academic behavior. Do you use something tangible? Is it verbal? Is there a monthly kind of celebration? And then discuss, what forms those acknowledgements come in, and what are the students' reaction to that? Do they respond to that acknowledgement? Do they like it? Do they just sort of blow it off? So have that conversation first. Okay. So now we're going to talk about what we know about behavior and reinforcement. Right? We know that if we provide somebody something desirable after they do a behavior, they're more likely to do that behavior again, right? That's called reinforcement. Positive reinforcement, they're given something, right? Like a ticket or a reward point, right? But sometimes you might take something away that someone doesn't like, and that actually can have the same reinforcing effect. Like if I do the cooking in my house, I get the washing up taken away from me. I don't have to do that part. So I'm more likely to do the cooking, and my husband will do the cleaning up. Either way, it strengthens my behavior of cooking. Right? So let's consider these student examples here. If a student is given verbal praise for persisting with a difficult assignment, the student is likely to persist on later difficult assignments, right? However, if a student is instead removed from the classroom after they refuse to do the difficult assignment, put their head down, right? Then the student may learn that they can get out of something by that behavior, and they might be more likely to act up again in the future when they don't want to complete the work or they can't complete the work because it's difficult. So we don't want to reinforce the acting up behavior by getting them out of something they don't want to do, right? So you can see that reinforcement works in those both ways, in two ways. It can encourage behaviors we don't want to see, or it can encourage the behavior, it encourages the behaviors we do want to see, but it can inadvertently encourage behaviors we don't want to see. So when we're responding to a student behavior, we really want to think about the impact, right? Sometimes we think we're giving a punishment, like having the student leave the room, but we might actually be giving them exactly what they want. So for that second scenario, we would want to think about ways to teach that student new strategies to persist, or maybe strategies to take a controlled break, or how to ask for help when they don't feel they can do something, right? Either way, we want to make sure to provide acknowledgements to encourage the skills we do want to see, like asking for help or asking for a break, rather than mistakenly reinforcing the behaviors we don't want to see. When we provide that positive feedback for students, we want to provide it to them with behavior-specific praise. And that's just what it sounds like. We want to be specific about what the behavior is that they did that we're praising, right? Because we want to make it clear to students that they did that well and that they should do it again. So if we see a student who helped put away all the lab equipment appropriately, right? We don't want to just say, hey, good job. So we might say his name and be real specific about what he's doing well. So I might say, Eric, I really appreciate you sticking around and helping to clean up and put away all of the supplies appropriately. I know this lab was difficult. It was nice seeing you stick with it. Now he knows that I'm talking to him, that he did something deserving of praise, and what exactly he did, what behavior he exhibited to get that praise. And not only do we want to think about how we're praising our students and giving them that feedback, we also want to think about how often we're doing that and giving that positive praise. It's not necessarily about the volume of praise statements per se. It's more about a ratio. And the research suggests we should provide praise at least a 4-to-1 ratio. So 4 positive praise statements to every 1 critical or corrective statement. And that could be directed either at an individual student, a group of students, or the whole class, those positive statements. And this helps create a positive relationship with your students, a positive environment for your classroom, right? By providing more positives than negatives. So, just ask yourself, would you rather work in an environment where you're getting more criticism or more compliments, right? I think it's probably more compliments, right? And as a quick note, that 4-to-1 positive ratio is great, but if you're working with students who are at risk for emotional or behavioral disorders, that ratio should actually be closer to 9 or 10-to-1 positive to corrective, in order for those students to increase their academic engagement and decrease the interfering types of behaviors. What are some benefits of an acknowledgement system? Well, like we've been mentioning, it creates a more positive student to teacher interaction and relationship. It increases the likelihood that that behavior will be repeated, right, by letting them know what they did right. It continues to clarify the expectations for appropriate behavior, and that they continue to be important to the adults. And it reduces the need to engage in lots of time-consuming disciplinary measures, right? Sort of that stitch in time saves 9. If we're proactive on the front end, we don't have to be so reactive on the back end. So take some time and read that research brief about high schools, and that's going to talk about determining the need for a formal acknowledgement system, right? Think right now, is the current pattern of student behavior at your school, is that acceptable? Are you okay with the misbehavior or what's going on throughout the building? Or do you have a need to improve your school-wide culture? Right? Do students perceive that their positive behavior is actually acknowledged regularly? Do we want to have a focus group with them and talk to them, or a survey to find out? Do faculty and staff perceive that they are acknowledging students in a positive way adequately? Sometimes they think they're doing a good job, but students say, no, I never hear when I'm doing things right. So definitely make sure you survey both so you can see if there's a miss there. And then you definitely want to examine whether students from non-dominant populations in your building experience acknowledgements for their positive behavior as well. Or are we missing a subgroup? It could be racial, ethnic, 504 IEP students, English language learners. We want to make sure everybody is acknowledged. So can we disaggregate our survey results and see if they feel that they're being acknowledged as well? So review that high school acknowledgement brief and the questions we just talked about on that slide. Talk about, do you feel like there's a need to have a more formal acknowledgement system, reinforcement system? Would it be helpful to survey staff and students? Do you already have a survey that's done? Maybe you did the climate survey like we talked about before. Can we go in and dig into that? If you haven't done a climate survey and would like to, we can open a Georgia climate survey on PBIS apps. You can just reach out to your PBIS trainer for that. Right? So review that and then add any items to your action plan as necessary. Okay. So once you've decided on creating a formal acknowledgement system, if you have, you need to build it. And just like your core values and your teaching plan, your acknowledgement system will be unique to your building, right? As we discussed, staff buy-in is crucial, right? Our society has lots of examples for being acknowledged, for adults being acknowledged for their behavior, right? Just think about it. Facebook lights or credit card, airline points, gas points, coffee cards, right? Even our paychecks are forms of acknowledgement for our hard work, right? These small or sometimes not so small tokens keep us coming back to that store or continuing that behavior, right? Students are no different, even high school students. Right? And keep in mind, an effective acknowledgement system is not just a list of rewards, what they can get, right? It's that interaction between the adults and the students. and letting them, it's the teaching of what we expect and letting them know that they're exhibiting that behavior. It's a process. Here's some examples of how you can create some different systems. This one up here is a high school, Attleboro High School in Massachusetts, and their students get points for good behavior, and they can spend those points at the school store. And you can see they have lots of good school swag in there, sweatpants and t-shirts and things like that. Schools sometimes use a ticket to let the student know what they did correctly. You can put their name on it, the staff names on it, even what they did appropriately. For a lot of schools, it might go into buckets like here at the bottom. This is an example of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade buckets right in the school office. And once the student gets a ticket for doing something well, they go put it in their grade level bucket. At the end of each week, 2 or 3 names are pulled from each grade level for a weekly drawing prize. And then when the whole bucket fills up, that whole grade level has a reward. They have a fun day, maybe some social time, outside time, maybe a special treat at lunch. And the nice thing is here, you've got the individual reinforcer of the ticket, the unpredictable reinforcer of a few getting picked out weekly, and then everybody gets to celebrate when they fill up the bucket, everybody in that grade. Some other ways of reinforcing students and creating acknowledgement systems are to have students of the month. It could be an art student of the month, those who show the character trait of the month. Some schools do the most improved students. We want to try to acknowledge as many students in as many different ways as we can. This is an example of a school who did quarterly celebrations. They did at the end of each marking period. Any student who did not get a referral that resulted in an in-school or out-of-school suspension, which were the only 2 punishments they would get for a major referral, they could participate in a school-wide activity. Lots of times it was kickball or it could be like a pancake breakfast. I know one time they did apples and cider outside. In the spring, they usually do a senior staff kickball. And if you didn't get a referral, you were allowed to go out and participate and watch it. The students who didn't participate did not get a second punishment. They got to stay inside and sort of sit in the study hall and they could just sort of hang out there. They didn't get a second punishment, but they didn't get the fun event that everybody got. And students really came to like this, and they saw a huge decrease in problem behaviors. So we want you to keep your acknowledgements organized and purposeful. And it's helpful to create a document like this. This is an acknowledgement system matrix. It breaks down all of the different systems in the school that are being run throughout the day, year, and so on. You'll notice this team broke down their acknowledgements by type, what's earned, who's going to give it out, when they give it out, where, how it works, who it is distributed to, and then very importantly, why, right? To acknowledge students displaying the expected behavior. As far as the types of acknowledgements, right? We have high frequency. These are predictable, happens all the time in the moment. So they had pride signatures that staff would sign their agenda book under the expectation, and lots of verbal praise throughout the day. And then they can it tells us how they're going to turn in those signatures. When they get a certain amount, they can turn it in. The homeroom teacher submits the name, right? The administrator picks the name and announces it over the intercom. It's very clear. All the different pieces are here. So whether it's current staff you need to teach or substitutes or a new teacher who comes in, everything's in one place and easy to understand. And then you can see here that they've gone on to have unpredictable or intermittent rewards, kind of like picking out of that bucket. In this example, they send notes home to parents, and they provide a template, maybe a little postcard, And each homeroom is sending home to 1 or 2 boys or 1 or 2 girls every 2 weeks. So they're trying to make sure every student experiences. And that's always a really nice surprise for parents. They love that. And then don't forget about those long-term big celebrations, school-wide celebrations. Again, it could be quarterly or for the year, just so that you're celebrating as a whole and we're creating our whole culture so that we're not missing any kids. Everybody will participate in the long-term celebration. Okay, so how do we effectively use acknowledgements? I think we went over that, but when we're implementing a reinforcement system, we want to make sure that they're effective and have the impact that we want, which is to encourage the behaviors we want to see both in students and in the faculty. And here's a few things you just want to consider when you're building your system. We want to provide reinforcements that's consistent with the student's phase of learning. So if the skill is brand new, we need to give lots of praise at a high frequency. So just think of something physical, like maybe learning to ski, right? You need to be told, yep, good job, your knees are bent. Right, I like how your elbows are tucked in by your side. Good, now you're snowplow, go side to side. You need to hear lots of feedback at a high rate to know that you're doing it well. And then once you start to master it, you can dial that frequency down, but we still want to praise here and there, right? To let them know that we still see them, they're still doing a good job, and it's still important. Don't stop doing it. We want to seek feedback from the students and families and the communities about the preferences for the acknowledgement. Are they earning what they want to earn? Sometimes it's stuff like we saw swag, but sometimes it can be privileges or social time. Eric, I think you had a good example of this, right?
Sure. I know of one school where they have a senior privilege area. It's basically their cafeteria. And as long as students maintain a certain grade level and maintain appropriate behaviors, they have access to this senior privilege during their break times. And it's just a nice time where they don't necessarily have to be studying. They can be socializing with each other, which is really important, especially in that senior year. So it's a really nice reward available for those seniors.
Nice. Definitely. Yeah. The older students get, it seems like that social time, that time to de-stress and relax is something that they really care about. But all students are different. So again, survey them. Remember, you could have a school store that also has cards that they can get that says, you know, maybe a quiet lunch with 2 friends away from the noisy cafeteria, or some social time to hang out, cut to the front of the lunch line, things like that. They don't all have to be stuff. So just don't go with what you think they want. Definitely involve them so it's what you know they want. And sometimes they'll want to get things, and sometimes they'll want to get out of things. Right? So think about that. Maybe they get a get out of homework card or a homework extension card, right? So in case they have several assignments due on one day, they can say, hey, I'm turning this in. I'm going to give this to you in 2 days. I have a 2-day grace period card. So lots of things that you can come up with. Like we said before, we want to be specific when we give our praise so students know exactly what they did right. And always consider that ratio. Are we giving more attention to the behavior we want to see again? You will get more of the behavior you pay attention to. So always keep that in your head. Are we paying more attention to the behavior we want to see, or more attention to the behavior we don't want to see? We want to be careful that we're not using the reinforcer as a bribe or a punishment. I'm taking it back, or you can't get this. We want to encourage the skills when we see it. We encourage what we expect them to do. And then when we see it, we reinforce that behavior. And always be sure that we dig in to make sure that our acknowledgement system is used consistently with all groups, and that there's reinforcers that are effective for all different groups of learners. So if you're looking for more ideas, you can go to the PBIS exemplar repository on any PBIS. There's lots of great examples of matrices and lesson plans, and also recognition systems that you can look in there. And I'd like to just make a note. Sometimes people will say rewards. I like to use the term acknowledgement or reinforcement. That's what we're doing. We're acknowledging that they did it right. We're hoping to reinforce that behavior so they do it again next time. And I think that's good. Those are good terms to use with staff rather than using the word reward. And here we go. Because when we use reward, a lot of times people will say, aren't rewards dangerous? We're just rewarding them, right? Well, there's been lots of research and meta studies on all sorts of other research that has been done. And they have concluded that there is no inherent negative properties of rewards or reinforcement, right? So you can look at those studies if you have staff who need to dig into that more. But although research doesn't bear out that there's any negative property to that, we still want to be thoughtful about how we're using them. And we want to use them in appropriate and naturalistic ways to prepare our students, right, for life beyond K-12 school. Also keep in mind that tier 1 acknowledgement systems for middle school students are probably going to look different than systems for high schoolers. But remember, acknowledgement systems still exist in the adult world, right? We talked about cash back and point systems and all of that, even your paycheck, right? So acknowledgement systems are all around us at every stage of our life. And you can create an array of acknowledgements that look more mature as our learners become more mature, right? So if you're a school that's a middle and a high school, it might look slightly different for your 6th, 7th, and 8th graders than it does for your upperclassmen. Given that adults also use and respond to acknowledgement systems, why not acknowledge them too, right? School staff absolutely need and deserve that acknowledgement. You're asking them to learn and perform new skills that maybe some of them haven't used before. So we need to let them know when they're doing it correctly and that we appreciate them going out of their comfort zone to try these new skills out. But again, spend some time figuring out what's meaningful to adults. Lots of schools will use, a Starbucks coffee card, but some of your teachers might not drink Starbucks, right? Are there other things you might include? Like here, a preferred parking spot. That's always great, especially in the winters. Or get out of school early card that sometimes principals will do a little drawing, and it allows teachers to leave 15 minutes early to get ahead of the buses, right? Maybe get to an appointment on time. Just simple things like a staff shout out, just letting each other know that they're appreciated and they're doing a great job, right? So there's lots of different ways to acknowledge adults, right? And again, just like students, ask them. When we're acknowledging adults, again, we want it to be, in a regular format, maybe at every faculty meeting or at the end of every month. We want to make sure all staff are a part of this, not just the teachers who come to your staff meetings, but what about our paraprofessionals, our secretaries, our custodial staff, our bus driving staff? We want to encompass everybody and keep it culturally and contextually appropriate for our building. Functionally relevant. Remember, some teachers would say, leaving 15 minutes early and beating those buses, that's meaningful to me. Other people are like, I love that coffee cart because I stop at Dunkin' every day. And so having a Dunkin' Donuts coffee cart is great for me, right? So you want a little bit of both. And then, of course, you want the administrator and the team to be involved in that. And there are some other examples there. And along with these examples as well, lots of good ways to reinforce staff. And if you want, you can pause now and talk about how you reinforce staff currently. Okay, because we haven't given you enough continuum of procedures to strengthen appropriate behavior guidelines, here's a few more, right? Always we want to be easy and quick with the style of acknowledgements so that for adults it's easy to use. They don't have to fill out a huge long form and do a whole bunch of things. It's simple, it's quick, it's tied to your school expectations, and you can use it throughout the building, right? With students you know and students you don't know, because we really want everybody interacting with everyone. As we mentioned before, again, find out what systems your peers are using. There might be something great happening in a classroom, some teachers using a really effective classroom reinforcement strategy, and you might be able to build that out for your whole school-wide strategy. Once you've created it, write it down. You want it to sustain. You want it somewhere that your team can refer to, your entire staff can refer to. You can put it in sub packets. Everybody knows where it is. If they can't remember, wait, are we supposed to do this on Friday? The principal's here. Does somebody pick a name? How does that work? You can go and read that and everybody knows how it works. Right? And then finally, make sure you build time into your school calendar to train staff how to use it, whether it's PD, grade level meetings, whatever. You really need to review this with staff, give them some training. You might even need to have them role play so that they feel comfortable doing this, especially if it's something that they're not used to doing. So take some time on your own or with your team to complete the acknowledgement worksheet, and you can find that at nepbis.org. Think about what you might want to provide to students as high frequency reinforcers, intermittent reinforcement, and long-term celebrations. And also, how might you acknowledge your staff? So once you've identified some practices and systems, map them out using that matrix, who, what, where, how does it work, right? How do we redeem them? All those pieces. And again, as with everything, if you're not able to get to this now, don't just brush it aside. Write it down on your action plan so you remember to go back and tackle it later. And don't forget to use that exemplar repository for some really good ideas. Okay, so that was today's agenda. We went through reviewing our class-wide expectations and how to build an acknowledgement system. And hopefully you are going to take some time now to draft your acknowledgement system, put everything that you are currently doing, and then start to fill in the holes where things are missing. In our March training, we're going to go over a continuum, the other side, for correcting problem behaviors, because despite our best efforts being proactive and teaching the desired skills, there are still going to be problem behaviors that we need to address. And during that session, we will work on drafting actual behavioral definitions for problem behaviors, what kind of responses, the discipline responses, and then we'll take a look at our office discipline referral form, make sure we're gathering all the correct information. And finally, we'll be working with you to schedule a time to take your tiered fidelity inventory with your trainer. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.